Evening, everyone. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I'm going to call to order the first of two public hearings. First is an ordinance of the Borough of Westchester, Chester County, Pennsylvania, amending the Westchester Borough Code, Chapter 99, titled Taxation, to amend Article 5, titled Real Estate Tax, to adopt Sections 99-42.1 through 99.42.4 to adopt a real estate tax credit to qualifying volunteers of the Westchester Fire Department and Good Fellowship Ambulance.
There. So this is a public hearing. We are required to advertise tonight's hearing in the Daily Local News. We did that on August 8th, 2023. I have a copy of the proof of publication that we can mark as Borough Council Exhibit 1. And we also have to send a copy of the ordinance to the Daily Local and to the Chester County Law Library for public inspection. And that was done on July 25th, 2023. So I think that this has been discussed. The council, one of the ways to encourage volunteers is to offer tax credits. The state law allows you to offer tax credits to qualifying volunteers of your fire departments and your emergency service providers. So what this ordinance would do, you do have a chapter in the Borough Code, which is Chapter 99, that addresses all of your taxation, your real estate tax, your earned income tax, that kind of thing. So that's where we felt it was appropriate to put this section. So it does identify that qualifying volunteers, and each either the Westchester Fire Department or Good Fellowship Ambulance would determine what is a qualifying volunteer. But it would allow a qualifying volunteer to receive a tax credit against their real property tax. The ordinance doesn't establish the amount of the credit. That will be done through a subsequent resolution that you can do at your next meeting. So this is just establishing that you are willing to grant that tax credit on your real estate tax to qualified volunteers of both the Westchester Fire Department and Good Fellowship Ambulance.
Thank you, Ms. Camp. Are there any comments about this from council or the mayor on the dais? Anybody? Oh, Brian, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to say I do support this ordinance. There was an article out this past May, and it stated that there were at one time 300,000 volunteer firefighters in Pennsylvania. That was in the 1970s. Today, it's only 36,000. So this gives an opportunity to recruit more volunteers and also reward the existing volunteers. So I think that, we should all be for this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. McGinnis. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Thanks. Anybody else? I think it'd be appropriate to open up for public comment. If there is any. Okay, seeing none. If there's no further discussion or questions, I believe a motion to accept this ordinance would be prudent.
Mr. Stefano?
Yep.
Mr. Flynn from the 6th Ward would like to make a motion to accept this ordinance.
I second.
Great. We have a motion and a second to accept the ordinance. Without further discussion, Mr. Metrick, would you please call the question?
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro is absent. Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
And Mr. Stefano?
Yes. Okay. Motion carries 6-0. Going to close that public hearing, open our second one, which is an ordinance of the Borough of Westchester, Chester County, Pennsylvania, amending the code of the Borough of Westchester, Chapter 104, titled Vehicles and Traffic, Section 104-55.1, titled Unlawful Operation of Business, to delete the word business.
So again, public hearing, because this is part of your code. Chapter 104 is your vehicle registration, vehicles and traffic section of your code. We advertised tonight's hearing on August 8th. I have that proof of publication. And I also have the email that I sent to the Daily Local and Law Library enclosing a copy for public inspection. Ramsey Reiner, the parking director, had asked that we amend this to make it clear that only food trucks are permitted to be parked in the locations that are identified in this section of the code, which is on Church Street, the west side of Church Street from Sharpless to Rosedale, and on University Avenue, the south side from High Street to Church Street. The way that code section today is written, it could be interpreted to allow businesses in addition to just food trucks. So she wanted it to clear that it's only food trucks that can be operated in those locations on your public streets.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the dais? Okay. Any public comment on this? Okay, seeing no comments or questions from anyone, I think a motion to accept this would be in order.
Mr. Stefano, I make a motion to accept the ordinance as presented tonight.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance as presented. Without further question, Mr. Metric, would you please call the question?
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro is absent. Mr. McGinnis.
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey.
Yes.
And Mr. Stefano.
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Okay, I am closing our public hearings, and at 6:39, I'm calling to order our August 16th, 2023 Borough Council voting session. As you have heard already, Ms. Vaccaro will not be present tonight. Along with our call to order, I'm going to make a few changes. Items 5 and 6, I'm going to move up to happen right after our pledge, but after item 2. We have a lot of folks here for some ceremonial stuff and swearing in, so we'll get to that right away. So that's item number 1. Item 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. Can I please have that led by Mr. Allen? Okay, thank you. And as I said, I moved up 5 and 6, so we're going to skip ahead to item 5, which is a presentation of commendation to Vardy Jacobs by our police chief, James Moorhead.
Thank you, members of council. I appreciate you giving us the time before the meeting starts tonight. The Westchester Police Department would like to honor a citizen with a recognition award, and I'd like to have Mr. Varday Jacobs step forward. This is for an act of valuable victim and police service by going above the ordinary during a strong-arm robbery. On behalf of the Westchester Police Department and the communities we serve, I hereby commend you for your compassion and actions you exhibited on July 7th of 2023 in Westchester Borough. On that date at approximately 7:20 a.m., Mr. Jacobs was working in his capacity as a Borough of Westchester Public Works Supervisor and was in the area of High and Gay Streets when he observed a woman in distress who told him that a man had just assaulted her, punched her in the face, and robbed her of her cell phone. A person might be expected to observe and report one's observations after the fact. However, Varday Jacobs went above the ordinary and made the victim safe by placing her in his vehicle. Mr. Jacobs then followed the suspect in his vehicle as he fled. While following the suspect, Mr. Jacobs called the police dispatch to report the crime. Mr. Jacobs then observed the suspect assault another woman and continued to flee the area. Mr. Jacobs continued to follow the suspect, providing police dispatch with a description and direction of travel information, thereby enabling police to make a speedy arrest. After the arrest, Mr. Jacobs stayed on the scene and provided police with essential information that resulted in the successful prosecution of this felon. I hereby commend Varday Jacobs for his personal commitment and exceptional service to the citizens of Westchester Borough for going above the ordinary. Congratulations. Before the mayor starts, I hope Mr. Jacobs joins us in December for our new hire police test, because I think he shows he's got the aptitude.
So again, I wanted to add to the words of what Chief Moorhead has said. In this day and age where many people become bystanders to crime and don't want to be involved, we were impressed and thankful for your contribution and for your involvement. And so my certificate of recognition says, As mayor of Westchester, I hereby express my sincere appreciation to Varday D. Jacobs in recognition of your heroism to the Westchester community. On July 7th, 2023, you went above and beyond to assist a woman in need of immediate help after a frightful incident. Your quick thinking and action enabled a suspect to be apprehended almost immediately. Westchester is proud to have an employee as compassionate and caring as you, and we are thankful. Thank you. And so to that end, I'd certainly like to say that you have the key to the city. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Together.
You know, Varday, Mr. Metric wants to know if you made the victim put her seatbelt on before she got in a Borough vehicle. So. At this time, the police department is proud to swear in a new member of the police force. Thank you, Mayor DeBaptiste, for your diligent work on this selection process. I thank Civil Service Commission, Mr. Polito, Mr. Reese Davis, and Mr. Troy Chapman for their hard work. They do an awful lot of work for this borough. I appreciate their efforts, and I appreciate all the men and women who came out tonight for the swearing in of Kyle Drew Livesay. A little bit of backstory. Mr. Livesay is going to be sworn in tonight as badge number 176. One of his college professors is here tonight, who's a retired police officer from Westchester, whose badge number was 75. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but I thought it was important to point that out. A quick background before the mayor gives the oath of office. Mr. Livesay, please step forward. Kyle is 26 years old. He resides in East Goshen Township. Kyle is a lifelong resident of Westchester and a graduate of Baird Rustin High School. After graduation, Mr. Livesay attended Westchester University, where he graduated in 2019 with a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice. In 2019, Mr. Livesay did his college internship with this police department. Upon graduation, he was hired by the Newcastle County Police Department in Delaware, where he attended the police academy. Upon graduating the academy, he's worked as a patrol officer for the last 3+ years in Newcastle County, concentrating in their community policing unit. Kyle was born and raised in the Westchester area. He went to college in Westchester. He owns a home here, and now he's very proud to say that he works here. And I know this is a big dream of his, and I'm welcoming you aboard. We're all happy for you. Now we can do the important part.
So I, Kyle Livesay, do solemnly declare and affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the laws and ordinances of Westchester Borough and East Bradford Township. I will uphold, obey, and enforce the law without consideration to a person's race, color, sex, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicap, or disability. And I will execute the office and the duties of my office as officer of the Borough of Westchester, Pennsylvania, with fidelity. Thank you.
Council, again, I can't thank you for your support always of the police department, and thank you for your time this evening. And I do hope that tonight's meeting's a lot shorter than last night, so.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. So that was items 5 and 6. We're going to jump back up to item 3, which is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda. If anybody wishes to speak, they come on up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. I'm not seeing any, so we're going to move on to item 4, which is comments by the Borough Council and Mayor, and we will start with Mr. McCoy.
Good evening. I'll be brief so we can keep tonight's meeting short. Tomorrow's the last night for the concert in the park at Marshall Square. So hope people can make it out, and hopefully it'll be a night like tonight.
Thank you. Mr. McGinnis.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we have Labor Day coming up on September 4th, and to remember that what the labor movement has given all of us, the 40-hour work week benefits, paid time off, things of that nature, and how important it is, how important the labor movement is, not only to me, but all across Pennsylvania, and in particular, what happened on I-95 and how that bridge was rebuilt within 12 days. The men and women of the Philadelphia building trades did a phenomenal job, and I'm proud to say that they will be doing work in Westchester. And these people are our neighbors. They're people that we know, and we should salute them.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Greetings from the 6th Ward, sweetest ward in the borough. You're not going to believe it again. 22 North Darlington Street, another sweet shop. That Little Rose's Donuts is going to be opening very soon in September. That makes 16 sweet shops and 5 breweries in the 6th Ward. It's a wonderful thing. Just seemed like yesterday, we're telling everybody to start using sunscreen. And here it's the end of summer, and we're going into the nice fall season. The Westchester Borough would like to wish Media Borough, Little League, good luck in Williamsport tonight at 7 o'clock in the Little League World Series. One borough wishes another borough well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, same kind of idea. It's already the beginning of a new school year. I'm looking forward to this one as a teacher. It'll be our 2nd year in a row of things being relatively normal. So it's going to be honestly really great. So I just hope everyone had a great summer and continues to stay safe with these past few weeks we have. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Stefano. Just want to commend again our public safety representatives for a great national night out this year. I believe it was August 1st. Was a great turnout, and it was evident that a lot of planning and time went into that effort. So just wanted to thank them again.
Thank you. Mayor DeBaptiste.
So keeping in line with appreciation, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate not only our borough manager, but all the department heads and the council people who put in effort and time and energy to to talk to the people of Westchester and other areas, even when they are disagreeable or don't agree, they still maintain the open communication which is necessary to get the job done. And so I appreciate the time and effort that they all put coming to these meetings and being here night after night and to whatever it takes and doing whatever it takes. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a few things. First, congrats to our new hire and to Varde Jacobs for his commendation. That just really, I always love hearing these stories. I don't always get to hear them and see them. So it was just really amazing to hear. So congrats and thank you to both of them. School's back in session next week or 2 weeks actually. So check out for those school buses and kids walking around. They'll be out in the streets more, just be more aware of your surroundings. And I apologize for not making it last night. I know it was quite a doozy of a meeting. I have been on council for over 6 years now, I think, and we've raised taxes a few times, we've canceled Outfest, we've done all these things, and I think I got more emails about parking spaces in the last week than all combined over that than anything else that I've ever done. So interesting. Anyway, that's all my comments for tonight. We'll move on. We did 5 and 6, so we're moving on to item 7, which is discussing our grant strategy and awards. Mr. Williams.
So in Finance Committee last week, we had some preliminary conversation about grants, and we wanted to loop council into everything that's going on, so no one feels in the dark. The information that was requested was a list of the grants, what they were for, ask, match requirements, awards to date, project ETA, what fund or department the projects are for, who the partner is that's helping us write some of the grants, but not all of them, what those costs have been for the consultants, and when those grants went in. So just to summarize, and this is about 12 months going backwards. So 11 grants submitted for 8 projects. The total ask of those grants has been about 5.9 million. So far, we've only heard back from 2, and we've gotten both of them. That award has been about 1.3 million. So we have 9 grants pending. We should hear about at least 2 in September. Those are 2 we wrote in December, just to give you an idea of the time between submitting a grant and hearing back. To date, we've spent just shy of $20,000 on third-party engineering fees. That fee versus the money we're asking for comes out to 1/3 of 1%, just to put that fee in perspective. The fees we've paid to third parties that have helped us versus the grants we've gotten back that we've had awarded represents a 43,000% return on investments to taxpayers. And we have 2 or 3 opportunities we're eyeing up for the second half of the year, although most of the grants are focused, most of them are due in the first 2 quarters of the year. It's definitely slowing down. The focus of those projects have been stormwater, resilient infrastructure down at Goose Creek wastewater treatment plant, EV charging, parks and open space, pedestrian safety and streetscapes, and safe and accessible Gay Street open air marketplace, which is the most recent grant award we've gotten. So one of the concerns raised was, if we get all these grants, what are we committing to in terms of match? And so this is a worst case match commitment chart. And by worst case means we got all the grants. So that's a pretty good problem to have. And I wanted to put that spending, that commitment in reference to the average capital spending. So in this column here, that's our average capital spending per year by department. And then these, again, if we get all the grants that we're applying for, these would be the match commitments. So as you can see, the match commitments, if we get all these grants, we have all this match we have to put up, it really isn't even, it's hardly on the radar in terms of your average capital spending over the last 5 years. Couple of things I mention frequently, you probably heard me say them, but we don't always apply for grants for our highest priority projects. Highest priority might be a trash truck, you know, trash truck goes down. We need a new trash truck today. There might not be a grant opportunity. There might not be a grant for trash trucks. We have to find what's in our budget that we can pay for with grants. And the goal should be to minimize overall costs to taxpayers. I mentioned how long it takes to hear back on a lot of grants. That means we need to be writing grants 1 to 3 years ahead of when we expect that project to actually occur. So the work we've been doing the last 12 months is laying the groundwork for next year and the following years. If we get a grant and we can't come up with the match, you can always defer the project. I said usually they are, because I've never once worked on a grant funded project and you go back and see what you wrote for the project timeline in the application. And, you know, it's usually, you know, delayed at least a year, maybe 2. And you can always walk away from a grant. It's not a good look for the organization, but it happens all the time. In terms of using third parties to help write grants, you know, this was a directive of Borough Council when Remington and Burnick was appointed in January. They were appointed in part to help us write grants, and they've been doing that. It's actually required by some grants. That's just basically to validate that the applying organization has a third party that's sort of vetting what they're putting in the application and making sure you can deliver. It also shows the grantor that you have a project team in place. It shortens the project timeline because you're doing a little bit of work up front, and it will definitely reduce match via unanticipated costs. If you put together a cost estimate that's detached from reality, and then you get the grant, you go to do the project, you put it out to bid, boom, you got match unanticipated. So that's where you can really get into trouble with grants. And the other thing I'd like to mention is, if you remember, on the consent agenda is an amended grant resolution. So that was a resolution from last month, approved, you know, 3rd week of the month. Grant was due the last day of the month. In between council approving that resolution and us submitting the grant, Remington and Burnick got new pricing information, unit costs on some of the things that were included in the project. And they realized that the cost estimate they put together was too low. So what we did was we increased the ask of the grant, came back to council, and asked you to approve the amended resolution. It's impossible for us internally to keep up with the price of baffled rock toe or brick sidewalks on a real-time basis, but an engineer can do that for us, and that's the kind of insight they're delivering. That being said, we can't rely on third parties to write grants for us. This is on the left here is sort of process, and this big long list here is some of the things that might be included or must be included in pretty much all grant applications. And these orange arrows are pointing to things that over the last year we've asked those engineers to help with. So as you can see, there's a lot of things here that need to be collected, organized, created by staff that an engineer can't really help us with, or it makes sense for staff to do. And that's what our time commitment is for. But there's a lot of things that we need to rely on those partners for. And going back here, I wanted to, so if you average this out and include the zeros, we're spending about $1,800 per application in third-party assistance. Keeping in mind when an engineer gets paid, that's about 13 hours. So we're getting all of this for 13, it's about a day and a half on average to put these applications. Some municipalities rely entirely on engineers to put all this together, which would mean this column would be way higher. But I think we have a pretty good system going where we do everything we can and we rely on them for a few small pieces. And to my point about bringing the engineer on board early, if you get the grant and you do the project, or you do the project without a grant, they have a much bigger role to play. So it's good to bring them in early on in that process. And then lastly, one more reason not to let an engineer write a grant for you, third party, is these are two grant application questions and answers that we submitted. First one, I'm not going to read them. First one is very technical in nature. It talks about imbricated riprap. Lots of really technical stuff, what's going on, scope of work for a stream restoration project. The bottom one is, why is a Gay Street open air marketplace important to Westchester? No offense, we have great engineers. Asking someone in an office in King of Prussia or something like that to answer this bottom question versus someone who works here, someone who may have lived here, you're going to get totally different answers. That's not a full answer, by the way, but it's just what would fit on the slide. But, again, to my point about, there's certain things that our engineers are really good at, and then there's certain things we need that internal perspective of. And I think we're positioned well for the future. So I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, questions, Mr. Funk?
The first page of the grant discussion, can I have a copy of that?
Yeah.
That's all I really need.
Yep.
I really appreciate it. So I can follow things. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. McCoy?
That was really well laid out. Very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think it'd be helpful for all of council, whether you want it or not, to have a copy of this.
Sure.
Thank you.
No, I just want to conclude and say the same thing. But I do think it is a good thing that we're having Benoni and Remington Berwick write these grants with respect to the open air market. One thing is I would like to see is maybe some community involvement as far as how we want to go about doing it.
Yeah.
The aesthetics of that project. But other than that, I mean, I think I've been pleased. I mean, we're only spending less than 20,000 and we're getting 1.2 million. I mean, that's a pretty good rate of return.
Yeah. The 20,000 is spent, but the awards, we got 9 more potential awards. We're not going to get them all. I think like 1 and 3, 1 out of 4 is a good expectation, like long term. But that return's only going to go up.
And I do think, and this might be for the borough manager in your report, I think that you mentioned, how we're going to budget that for next year, how putting money aside for the grant match.
Yeah.
That way we're not going to be caught flat-footed when it's time to pay that match.
Yeah, it's a good point. And something we talked about was, the need for a plan and mapping this stuff out. I assure you that that's getting done. I said that last week. We're not firing off grant applications without regard to the repercussions of what happens if we get the grant. So that thinking is already happening.
Great. Yeah, again.
Mr. Williams, the touch on Mr. McGinnis's thought about the open air market. I echo his statement that moving forward into the open air market, the residents really weren't happy with the last proposal, and the businesses really weren't happy. And if we're going to move into doing something, it'd be great to have an ad hoc committee of residents and businesses and the police and the safety and everybody involved.
Sure.
That way there we can, as I was quoted in the paper, it's basically the people's street. Let's give them what they want. And if we're going to do some good landscaping and stuff like that, it's better to have, many hands, doing the lifting. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much, Will. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Any public comment on anything here? Okay. Move on. So item number 8, we are going to table for tonight and talk about that at a later date. There's some legal issues we're going to discuss actually after the meeting in executive session. Item 9 is the borough manager's report. Mr. Metrick.
Thank you. As an attachment to tonight's meeting was the document of the manager's monthly report. I'm not going to go over everything in the report, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of financial matters because I tend to think a lot about money in the job. The first part of the report reiterates the schedule for our budget development. So September is going to be a big month for budget development. So in your committee meetings, department heads are going to stand before you, talk about their plans for next year and how it can potentially impact expenses and revenues. And that's a great time to start asking questions and get the why behind the budget. I've asked all the department heads to to think about the story they want to tell when they present their budgets to you, and to keep it to about 5 or 10 minutes and supply you with that information ahead of time, so you know what we're up to going into next year. Next year is going to be challenging. I know that already. We were able to dip into American Rescue Plan Act funding to fund current cash capital projects. We aren't going to be able to do that to the extent that we were in the last couple of years. Council has allocated all of ARPA funding. Right now, we're working very hard to get those projects done, so we know if there's any leftover cash that can be allocated, because we have to complete that allocation process by the end of next year. So that's the schedule. I wanted to talk a little bit about the pension plan valuation reports that were issued by our plan actuary, circulated to the finance committee, discussed at the pension committee meeting, and distributed to you all not too long ago. Those documents, they're not public documents. We have to redact some of that information in the back of those reports to make that go public. But I was a little worried when these valuations were coming due, to be honest. It's a process that's done every other year, and it's state mandated, and it's using the same ruler to apply and measure the health of any pension fund in the Commonwealth, so that you know roughly how well your pension is doing. And it's also the information that's used to calculate the municipality's obligation for the coming 2 years. So very important document. And we all know that 2022 was a terrible year for equity and bonds. And 2021 was an exceptionally good year. So and going into it, not knowing the business as well as some of you, I thought we were going to get hit really hard, but we had a good result. So the funded ratios increased in both pension funds, police and non-uniform. A reminder to anyone listening and also council, the non-uniform plan is closed to new employees, has been now for 10 years. So I would expect us to really gain ground on that long-term obligation, and that MMO is going to evaporate at some point. And ideally, you want to see the funded ratio somewhere around 120, 125%. And at that point, your MMO really starts to become negligible. So what I want to just say is we're headed in the right direction. If you go back to 2013 and you look at these trend graphs for both plans, that's very good news. And I'm happy about that. The impact it's going to have on the MMO, hopefully, is to continue to drive those MMO costs down. There's two things that affect your MMO costs. That's the experience the plan has in its investments over the prior 2 years, and it's also any changes council makes in the assumptions in those investments. If you were to say, for instance, the expected rate of return in the pension funds should be 4%. Well, guess what? That's 2.75% lower than it is right now. So that you would incur a very big obligation to pay that off, and that would be put in a schedule in the report that's amortized over 10 or 13 years. So you'd be paying for that change in assumptions every time an MMO is calculated for a long time. The lesson here is that all of these numbers are designed to move slowly and patiently. And the good news is that think of it like a big 100-ton ship. And the good news is that it's going in the right direction. So as long as we keep our assumptions in tune with what we're going to get performance-wise, and there isn't a total meltdown in markets that is sustained over a long time, we should do really well. And this should really help us in next year's budget as well as future budgets. Concerning next year's budget, you will be getting the minimum municipal obligation soon. As soon as we get that calculated, it has to be presented to the elected boards in every municipality before September 30. So good news there. Also wanted to just make a brief comment about the audit of financial statements. Mr. Flynn was asking about, a management letter. There was no management letter because there were no findings. So there is an email, though, that Dale sent to Barb that I will ask her to share that with you with council. I'll tell you it has to do with a lease, one of the lessors at the Chestnut Street, pardon me, the Bicentennial Garage, we didn't adjust their monthly rent according to CPI the way we should, and the auditor flagged that, so we fixed that problem. But other than that, Barbara gets an A for her report card for the audit, so I'm very happy. Is she here tonight? So thank you very much. I also want to point out that even after you take away, the the cash that has been placed in the general fund as ARPA funding, we've had 2 positive years of growth in the general fund net balance. We haven't had growth in the general fund balance since 2016. So that's another testament to management's ability to contain costs. I think the most important thing in the audit is that statement of revenues and expenditures. What did we spend our money on? Did we spend more than we brought in? We can budget all we want, but when you get right down to it, it matters what really went out the door and what came back in. And so we've booked 2 really good years, and I really want to appreciate my staff for making that happen. That's a really important goal of mine, and for them to work on. So those are my financial highlights. There's other things in the report. I'll leave those to questions at a later point, or anything tonight if you have anything you want to ask me.
Thanks, Sean. Questions or comments? Yeah, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Metric, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Barb, great job. When the finance committee tried to initiate the pension pension program to go in private from PFM, I think Mr. Allen mentioned that we were distressed back in 2016, 2017, when we started, somewhere around there.
I remember it being 2019. But
Yeah, well, whenever it was, our pensions were in distress. And what I saw on the board today was that it looks like both pensions are hovering right around 97%. Is that what I
Yeah, the
saw?
funded ratio for both plans is the range of 94 to 97. Yep.
And I would like to thank the previous council and this council for agreeing to the EIT, the 25 basis points. I was called a lot of names. There were borough hall meetings, there were ward meetings saying that we didn't know what we were doing, but they're smarter people than me, got it done. And I'm glad that we're at 97% instead of 74% where we started. Mr. Allen, thank you. And, everybody else that helped out with this for the pension. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments for Sean? Okay, thanks. Thank you. All right, well, moving on to item 10, which is our consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Stefano, that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept our consent agenda. I do have to allow for public comment. Any public comment? Okay, without further discussion, Mr. Metric, would you call the question?
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro is absent. Mr. McGinnis?
Yeah.
Mr. Allen?
yes,
Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Ms. Dorsey? And Mr. Stefano?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Item 7 is other business. I'm just going to reiterate again that council and mayor are going to meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss legal matters involving short-term rentals. Any other business? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.